What do we mean when we say, "I only believe what there is evidence for"? At first, that sounds like the most cautious, reasonable position imaginable. It sounds humble. It sounds scientific. It sounds like the opposite of blind faith. And in modern atheism, few words carry more authority than evidence. If God exists, where is the evidence? If miracles happen, show me the evidence. If religion makes claims about reality, let them stand or fall on the evidence. But here's a strange question we almost never ask. Why should the universe produce evidence at all? Why should reality be structured in a way that allows facts to point beyond themselves? Why should observations mean something? Why should raw physical events line up with rational expectations inside a mind? In other words, why should the universe be evidence-friendly? Tonight, we're not asking whether God exists. We're asking something quieter, and perhaps more unsettling. Why does the very idea of evidence make sense in the first place? Part 1. What atheists mean by evidence. To be fair, we need to start by understanding the atheist position as strongly and charitably as possible. When modern atheists talk about evidence, they usually mean something like this. Evidence is publicly accessible data. It is repeatable, observable, measurable. It is independent of personal feelings or private revelations. It can, at least in principle, be checked by anyone. This idea of evidence is deeply connected to the success of modern science. Scientific reasoning works because experiments can be repeated, measurements can be verified, predictions can be tested against reality, errors can be corrected. From this perspective, religious claims often look suspicious because they appear subjective rather than public, tradition-based rather than test-based, resistant to falsification, entangled with emotion and culture. So the atheist says, "I'm not closed-minded, I just proportion belief to evidence." That sounds reasonable. And in many contexts, it is reasonable. But philosophy asks a different kind of question. Not, does evidence work? But, why does evidence work at all? Part 2. Evidence is not just data. Here's where something subtle happens. We often talk as if evidence is just out there, in the world. Raw facts waiting to be collected. But evidence is not just data. A rock falling is not evidence by itself. A number on a screen is not evidence by itself. A chemical reaction is not evidence by itself. Evidence only exists when something counts as evidence for something else. That little word, for, matters enormously. Evidence is not just a physical event. It is a relationship between facts in the world and rational understanding in a mind. To treat something as evidence requires concepts, inference, interpretation, expectation, normativity. A thermometer reading 20 degrees Celsius is evidence for a certain temperature. Only because we already assume that the instrument is reliable, that nature behaves consistently, that numbers represent real quantities, that our reasoning processes track reality rather than distort it. None of that is contained in the physical reading itself. Evidence is not just matter. Evidence is matter interpreted through reason. And that leads us to a deeper question. Part 3. Why a mindless universe shouldn't care about evidence. Let's imagine the universe as strict naturalism often describes it. No purpose. No intention. No design. No mind behind reality. Just particles and forces interacting blindly over time. In such a universe, things happen. But why should they mean anything? Why should one state of affairs point reliably to another? From the universe's point of view, if it has no point of view at all, there is no difference between a true belief, a false belief, or no belief. Atoms don't care whether a conclusion is valid. Neurons firing don't care whether an inference is sound. Evolution doesn't select for truth, only for survival. A belief can be false and still be useful. A reasoning process can be unreliable and still produce adaptive behavior. So here's the tension. If our cognitive faculties are products of blind, survival-driven processes, why trust them as truth-tracking instruments? This isn't an attack. It's a question many atheistic philosophers themselves have raised. Part 4: Evolution and the Problem of Truth. Evolution explains how certain traits become widespread. It does not explain why those traits are aimed at truth. Natural selection favors behaviors that enhance survival, not beliefs that correspond to reality. If believing comforting falsehoods helps survival, evolution has no reason to remove them. If logical shortcuts work well enough, precision is unnecessary. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, perception only needs to be useful. Reasoning only needs to be efficient. Belief only needs to be adaptive. But evidence assumes something much stronger. Evidence assumes that reality is intelligible, that our minds can grasp that intelligibility, that logical inference reveals how things actually are, not merely what helps us survive. That assumption is not neutral. It is not automatic. It is philosophical. And it leads to an uncomfortable question. Why should a mindless universe produce minds capable of discovering truth rather than just navigating illusion? Part 5: Evidence presupposes rational order. Every time we appeal to evidence, we are assuming several things simultaneously. The universe is ordered, not chaotic. That order is stable, not arbitrary. Our minds correspond to that order, not randomly. Logic applies universally, not just locally. Inference leads from reality to understanding, not away from it. None of these are discovered by evidence. They are assumed before evidence can function. You cannot prove logic using logic without circularity. You cannot test reason using reason without already trusting it. You cannot verify intelligibility without presupposing intelligibility. Evidence stands on a foundation it cannot itself justify. This doesn't make evidence meaningless. It makes it metaphysically dependent. Dependent on what? Part 6: Why evidence makes sense in a mind-designed world. Now consider a different picture of reality. Suppose the universe is not mindless. Suppose rationality is not an accident but a feature of reality itself. Suppose the order we discover is not imposed by us, but recognized by us. The laws of logic are not inventions, but reflections of a deeper rational structure. Minds are not cosmic flukes, but participants in an intelligible reality. In such a world, evidence makes sense. Reason fits reality. Truth is something minds are meant to encounter. This is not yet Christianity. This is not even revealed theology. It is a philosophical claim that rational minds belong in a rationally structured universe. And that claim fits more naturally with theism than with atheism. Part 7: This is not a God of the gaps argument. At this point, some viewers may feel uneasy. Isn't this just saying, we don't know, therefore God? No. This is not an argument from ignorance. It is an argument from conditions of possibility. We are not saying, science hasn't explained X so God did it. We are asking, what must be true for science and evidence to work at all? This is not about gaps in knowledge. It's about the framework that makes knowledge possible. Atheism can use evidence brilliantly. The question is whether it can account for evidence philosophically. Part 8: The quiet dependence atheism rarely notices. Modern atheism often presents itself as radically critical, but it quietly inherits assumptions it did not create. Objective truth, universal logic, reliable cognition, meaningful inference. These ideas did not arise from materialism. Historically, they arose from a belief that reality is intelligible because it is grounded in mind. You don't have to accept that conclusion, but it's worth noticing the inheritance. Atheism uses the tools of reason forged in a theistic intellectual tradition, then turns those tools against the worldview that gave them coherence. That doesn't mean atheism is irrational. It means it is philosophically indebted. Part 9: Why this matters for modern debates. This matters because debates about God often stall at the wrong level. We argue about miracles, scriptures, historical claims. But beneath all of that lies a deeper agreement. Both sides trust evidence. Both sides trust reason. Both sides trust truth. The real question is not, does God meet our evidential standards? But, why do those standards exist at all? Why does the universe invite understanding? Why does reality answer questions? Why do facts line up with rational expectation? These are not religious questions. They are philosophical ones. Conclusion: the question evidence can't answer. Evidence is powerful. Science is powerful. Reason is powerful. But none of them are self-explanatory. Every time we demand evidence, we are already standing inside a world that makes evidence possible, makes reason meaningful, makes truth discoverable. The question is not whether evidence disproves God. The quieter question is this: why does a universe without mind behave as if it were meant to be understood by minds? That question doesn't force a conclusion. It invites reflection. And perhaps, it reminds us that even our strongest tools of skepticism may rest on assumptions deeper than skepticism itself.